put it in the group please. Put කවුරු හරි වැඩි කරලා දෙන්න මට. මේක snap එකක් අරගෙන group එකට දාන්න. Right? හරිනේ නේද? හරි. මම group එකේ දාන්නනේ මේ අපි class කරනවා කියලා. බලන්න අපේ poll එකේ තිබ්බ වටිනාකම right. So I get to know there were 14 students who said that we'll skip it, and but there were 13 students who said we'll give a try and see. I love that hope, huh? So that makes the things living. හොඳයි යා hope එකක් තිබ්බා අන්තිමට කොහමද it worked. කටවරද්ද කරනවද නැහැ. හරියට දන්නේ මේක පාට. Right, okay. So I'll be wiping this one off. Right. Okay. Let's start things on. So today, as you know, and as we are aware, so we are going to discuss macroeconomic equilibrium. Right. Right. Macroequilibrium. So when it comes to macroequilibrium, right, in a very simple nutshell, what do you mean by equilibrium? The economy is held at a stable point. A stable point. So in general terms, right, you being stable, right? But in general terms, in terms of macroeconomy, what do you mean by stable, right, is where your income equals expenditure, right? So here very simple term, right? We know in usual equilibrium conditions, what we have identified is equilibrium, right? On micro terms, right? When we discuss on the microequilibrium, right? What we have noticed is this is where what we call demand equals supply, or else quantity demand equals supply. So in economics, right, we have so much of places where we discuss something called equilibrium. The core of equilibrium is stable, right? If someone asks you what is an external equilibrium, external equilibrium external sector. What do you mean by external sector? අපි මේ කතා කරන 9-10 lesson එක, right? About a foreign trade and foreign exchange ඒ පැත්ත. එතකොට ඒක ඒ sector එක stable තියනවා කියන්නේ that is an equilibrium. මේක කොහේ හරි කමන්න stable තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ මේ උඩ පල්ලෙහා යන්න පුළුවන් but stable. එක point එකක නවතලා තියෙන්න ඕනේ. That is called an equilibrium. So talking on equilibrium, the main point to discuss this equilibrium is right. මම එදා මේක ඇඳනේ ඇඳලා ඔයාලට කිව්වනේ මේක වැරදි කියලා ආයෙ මම මේක කියන්නේ. Right. So right, මෙතන output තියෙනවා නේද? The output. So we have this flat curve. Put a remind කරගමු මට කියන්න බෑ මොකද්ද මේ curve එක? What is this straight line curve? What do we call this? This is business cycle. What do we call this line? As අපි එදා කතා කරා. Yes. This is your potential output, right? Or that's the trend, how it goes. And this is your actual output, right? How it goes. Then last time also identified macroequilibrium finds A, B, C, D, right? So what are the points which have macroequilibrium? A, B, C, D. What are the points which has macroequilibrium? Right? Do we have macroequilibrium in A? Right? Do we have macroequilibrium in B? Do we have macroequilibrium in C? Do we have macroequilibrium in D? මොනවාට තියෙන්නේ macroequilibrium එක කොතනද තියෙන්නේ? A, B, C, D. Alamai, where can we find a macroequilibrium? A, B, C, D. So answers නැද්ද? නැත්නම් මට answers පෙන්වන්න නැද්ද? Alamai, what are the macroequilibrium? A, B, C, D. Right? So I have got complete ones. Hari. Hari mama simply අහන්නම් A B C D ඔයාලා yes or no ද කියන්න නැත්නම් ඔබ කියන්නේ. A තියනවද? A is it yes or no? A is it yes or no? A macroequilibrium එකක්ද? Yes. B macroequilibrium එකක්ද? B මේ point එක B. B. Okay, people say it's no. Then C, yes or no? Okay, yes. Then D, the trough. Okay, people say no. මම දන්නේ ඔයාලා මේ ගිය ක්ලාස් එකේදී අපි දැන් සතියක් විතර තමයි මේටලා ඒ ක්ලාස් එකේ ඔයාලා මොනා කර කර හිටියද කියලා මට නම් ඔක අයිඩියා ගන්න නැහැ. So the other one. Right? හරි මම මේක දැන් යන්නේ නැහැ. හරි මේක අපි මෙතනින් කියමුකෝ. right. ඔන්න ඔයාලට උඩ මතක තියාගන්න මේක තමයි ඔයාලා කිව්වේ නේද? It is what you told me. Right? එතකොට macroequilibrium එක ඔයාලා කිව්වේ මොකක්ද? A and C. It is what you told me. හරිද? ඔයාලා ඔක තමයි මට කිව්වේ. macroequilibrium එක කොතනද තියෙන්නේ? A and C. ඒ කියන්නේ මේ point එක. Right? Sorry. Then forget this one. Keeping this thing in your mind. Now let's jump into the concept of equilibrium and right? Sorry. Then talking on macroequilibrium. Right? When we talk on macroequilibrium, what are the approaches? What are the ways of getting equilibrium into account? අපි equilibrium එක කියන එක හොයන්න පුළුවන් approaches ගොඩක් තියෙනවා. Approaches කියද? තුනක් තියෙනවා. මොකක්ද මේ තුන? What are the ways, right? Or else what are the approaches? Approaches where we can find macroequilibrium. Approaches තුන මොකක්ද? අලමයි approaches තුන මොකක්ද? What are the three approaches which we can generate or which we can get macroequilibrium? Yes? Okay, one is what? Aggregate demand equals aggregate supply. How we got this one? අපේ micro එකේ තිබෙන්නේ මොකද්ද? Demand and supply. ඊට පස්සේ මොකද කරන්නේ? Micro means individual economic unit. What do you mean by macro? Collection of individual economic units. So make a collection එක becomes aggregate. Right? Micro එකේ තියෙන්නේ එකයි ඒ ඔක්කොම එකතු කරපුවාම aggregate. So this is one way. Second is what? Right? Ongoing stable. Stable තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ මෙන්න මේක. Your income equals expenditure approach. Right? Third one is coming from, right, a usual circular flow of income. Then circular flow of income එක චුට්ටක් කතා කරන්න යා. What do you mean by circular flow of income? Right. We have economic units in the country, in the economy. Household. Then we have business works. මේ දෙන්න තමයි මුලින්ම ඉන්නේ. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඉන්නේ. And we have markets. අපිට සාමාන්‍යයෙන් generally we have two main type of markets. One is your goods and services. or අන්න තමයි කියන commodity market. Right? Then we have what? We have factor market. Right? ඔනෝක තමයි තියෙන්නේ. So first, in a usual two-sector economy, right? In a usual two-sector economy, let's see what is happening. Very simple. Your households send your factors to your factor market. What are the factors they have? Land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Right? Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship is sent to the factor market. But the business firms would do, they would hire these factors for their business production. Right? They would again get land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Then in economics, Adam Smith said there is no free lunch. Nothing comes for free. Instead of these factors, they would get factor rewards. Right? So what are the rewards? For land, it's wages. For labor, for land, it's rent. For labor, it's wages, capital, interest, and for enterprise or else entrepreneurship, it's normal profits. So this would be flowing back into the household as rent, WI, not profits, normal profits. Now, what would happen? The process would happen inside the business firm, and now the goods would be sent to him. What would be sent? Goods and services. Right? And what the household would do, they would buy goods and services from you. Right? So they would buy goods and services from here, and they would pay for whatever they buy. They would pay for whatever they buy. So this is called your consumer expenditure. Right? Your consumer expenditure. So whatever they buy would be taken back into the business firm as their producer revenue. Right? As the producer revenue. So this is how a two-sector economy works. Two-sector economy is a basic transaction. Two-sector you have only දෙන්නයි. This household and business firms. We call this one as a simple economy also. Then what would happen? We have government also included. Plus, additionally, we will have one more market coming on, that is your financial market. Right? So what would happen in financial market is, you would save in here, where they would be taken back as loans. Right? And they would be, right? So basically loan right? On a loan now they would, with the money they took, the loan they are going to ask for, what? They are going to ask for capital goods and services. Right? Then මෙයාලා මොකද කරන්නේ? මේ ගන්න loan එකෙන් ගන්න මොනවද? Commodity market එකෙන්මයි ගන්න. But commodity market එකේ what they buy? They buy capital goods. What do you mean by capital goods? අපි ගන්න ලොකු machines, ඒ වගේ ලොකු දේවල්. So that is called what? That is called an investment. Right? Investment එක කියන්නේ මොකද? මෙයාලා මේකට සල්ලි pump කරලා they take capital goods, and in the business now they have more capital goods, and when they have more capital goods they can produce more. That is why it is called an investment. So meantime we have government, right? So what the government would do is government would they collect taxes basically. Basically the main jobs එක කියන්නේ පොඩ වැඩි simple කරන්න, and they take and they give you transfer, right? The same thing, they pay taxes and they pay you transfer, right? What more they would do? Government එක නිකන් තියන්නේ නැහැ. Government needs people, right? So they would hire what we call is factors. They would hire land, labor, capital, and enterprise, and they would pay you, right, rent, wages, interest, and non-profit. What more the government would do? Government would take goods and services, and they would also make a government expenditure. Make a basic day what is happening, right? But the point is make a meaning now in right? We have the right we have here we have something called international market, right? So international market, what would happen? We have actually two set of international markets, right? We have international commodity market. Where what all this goods sell, and we also have international factor market. අන්න ඒ දෙගොල්ලම ඉන්නවනේ අපේ ගෘහ සේවයට යන්නේ, and ලංකාවේ චීනු ඉන්නේ, චයිනීස් කට්ටිය ඉන්නේ. That is international factor market. අපි products ගන්නවා, ඒ වගේමයි materials ගන්නවා. So what would happen is the excess product in here, right? Excess product in your commodity market would be sent out as exports. And the lacking part, the things which we lack in here, would be taken in as imports, right? And in here, the excess factor would be going out, right? And we call them as what? Foreign primary income, right? Primary income. Factor going out, that is primary income. Primary income received, right? So people go there, right? Actually, people who go is landlord capital go out. Right? Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship go out, and instead of that, what we get? Primary factor income received. He received primary factor income, right? And then the lacking part people, they would here come here, right? That is primary factor income paid, right? So we have primary income received and primary income paid. So when we amalgamate this and when we aggregate these things, when we nullify them, we get net foreign factor income, net foreign factor income, right? අපි එකතු කරන්නේ GDP එක GNP එක කරන්නේ එකතු කරන්නේ. That part coming here, right? That is the part coming in here, right? So now you can see what do you mean by usual case of, hold on a second. right? So basically whatever things happening inside may put a national account in a link whatever the things which is happening inside this place මේක අස්සේ වෙන ඒවල මොකක්ද කියන්නේ මේ circular flow එක අස්සේ මොකක්ද වෙන්නේ that is called GDE gross domestic expenditure මේක අස්සේ වෙන හැමදේම called GDE right then ඒකට එනවා මොකක්ද මෙන්න මේ part that is GDP ඒකට එකතු වෙනවා මේ part එක that is called what GNP that is how the economy works as a whole right දැන් අපි කතා කරා මේක මේ චුට්ටක් additional part එකක් right මේක නිකන් පොඩක් overview එකක් දුන්නේ so you can see we have demand and supply okay fine income expenditure okay fine but we have to identify the other equilibrium approach is that make a flow එකන්නේ circular වටේ කරකිනවා right ඕක අස්සේ stable ලා කොයි වෙලේ ගත්තත් මේ පැත්තේ income එකයි මේ පැත්තේ expenditure so ඔක්කොම සමානයි right but we could say there are couple of එළියට යන ඒවායි ඇතුළට එන ඒවායි so we call them as what withdrawals and injections right so this is a withdrawal and injections right withdrawals and injections so these are the three approaches where we can find a macroeconomic equilibrium දැන් මම පොඩි point එකක් මේ තුන achieve වුණාම right නැත්නම් මේ තුන approaches තුන ගියාම මේ approaches තුන වුණාම right there is one more additional condition that happens මේ economic අස්සේ හිතන්නකෝ for an example aggregate demand equals aggregate supply එතකොට මොකද වෙන්නේ we know මේ තුනම වෙනවා right මේ තුන එකපාර වෙනවා but there is an additional condition that happens මොකක්ද ඒ condition එක මේ තුන achieve වෙද්දී economic අස්සේ මේ තුන achieve වෙද්දී there is one more important thing that happen in the market මොකක්ද that happen in the economy actually මේ තුන achieve වෙද්දී එක important දෙයක් economy එකේ සිද්ධ වෙනවා අන්න හරි වගේ right yes Subodh good what is that one additional thing that happen that is what your inventory changes become zero right your inventory changes become zero why මේ හැමදේම සමානයි නේද එතකොට කොහෙවත් stock එකක් ඉතුරු වෙන්නේ නැහැ stock එකක් ඉතුරු වෙන්න බෑ stock එකක් ඉතුරු වෙනවා කියන්නේ මොකද්ද unstable what do you mean by stable දෙක සමානයි right කොහේ හරි stock එකක් ඉතුරු වෙනවා කියන්නේ මොකද්ද ඒ කියන්නේ මේ approaches තුන achieve වෙන්න බෑ so what you need to keep in mind we have three approaches and we have four conditions මොකද්ද conditions right aggregate right so what we have three approaches and we have four conditions ඒ කියන්නේ මොකද්ද four conditions කියන්නේ මොකද්ද මේ එක approach එකක් achieve වුණොත් මේ තුනම ඒ කියන්නේ මේකත් එක්ක මේ හතරම සිද්ධ වෙනවා right that would happen in the economy but inventory changes zero කියන එක is not an approach to find equilibrium that is a condition ඒ කියන්නේ සරල දෙයක් නෙවෙයි right approach එකක් කියන්නේ කෙල්ලයි කොල්ලයි යාළු වෙන්න පුළුවන් that's an approach right කෙල්ලයි කොල්ලයි යාළු වුණාම වටේ ඉන්න යාළුවෝ ටික මොකද වෙන්නේ they would be happy that's a condition right that's a condition right අන්න ඒ වගේ පොඩි කතන්දරයක් තියෙනවා so approaches තුන මොකක්ද කියලා හමුත් මේක ලියන්න එපා this is a condition ඒ කියන්නේ අර තුන achieve වෙද්දී equilibrium එකේදී මේ දේ වෙනවා කියන එකයි කියන්නේ right at the equilibrium this happen but when it comes to approaches මේවා තමයි theoretical approaches තුන right ඉතින් අන්න ওই part එක උඩට දාගන්න හරියට then we'll take one by one we'll take this one first and we'll discuss this also මේ තුනම අපි කතා කරමු හැබැයි චුට්ටක් මේව වෙන වෙනම ගන්න වෙයි චුට්ටක් ලොකු හින්දා we'll try to make everything in the one page right okay starting with very simple fact which is aggregate demand equals aggregate supply හරි මේක ගැන මොනවද ඔයාලට කියන්න තියෙන්නේ aggregate demand equals aggregate supply මේක ඔයාලගේ සිලබස් එකේ වැඩි කතන්දරයක් කියලා නැහැ but I explain things in very nutshell, very simple fact. I told you this is your macroeconomic equilibrium. Micro demand equals supply. What do you mean by macro? Aggregate demand equals aggregate supply. So in micro, it is demand and supply. Right? Right? It goes, right? But this is your micro. Right? So, but when you compare it to macro, right? Right? Make it assuming that we have more. The macroeconomic equilibrium comes something, right? Right. So this is how you draw your aggregate demand equals aggregate supply condition. So in this scenario, what can be tested at the exam? Exam में क्या 100 points there. Simple point, right? Why? Tell me why your aggregate demand curve having this kind of a hyperbola rather than being a direct one? That is the first question. Tell me why. I make a demand without having something like this. I demand ඔය ලෙසන් එකකින් ඔයා කියන ඔයාලගේ සිලබස් එකේ මේක විතරයි අහන්න පුළුවන්. ඊට වඩා ලොකු දෙයක් අහන්න බෑ. උඩරිම අහන්න පුළුවන් ඔච්චරයි. Aggregate demand equal aggregate supply. හරි මේ දෙක සමාන කරා. done. However, the simple question is why this look like this? ඒක දැන් මේක කියන බලන්න why this? Why this look like this? What are the reasons? Right? කවුරු කියනවා? ඇයි supply curve එකක් නිකන් මෙහෙම නිකන් අමුතු බොක්කක් වගේ curve එකක් එක්ක ඇවිල්ලා මේක උඩට යන්නේ. and මේකයි මේ අතර යන්නේ. rather than going like this. මේ වගේ direct එන්නේ නැතුව එයි මේක මේ විදිහට එන්නේ. What's the reason behind that? Alamai? What's the reason behind this? Why this happens like this? Why this curvatures come like this? මේව ඉන්නේ ඇයි? දෙකේ එකකටද කියන්න බලන්න. කවුරුත් දන්නේ නැද්ද? නිකන් මේක ඇඳ විතරද ඉස්කෝලේ කරේ? නැත්තම් මාව ලැග් වෙනවද? හා? Okay, answers are coming. Right, okay. Hari. So I have gotten for the shape the answer have come for aggregate supply curve. Among it here is aggregate supply curve, why this happens, right? Let's classify these two, right? Aggregate supply this curve, right? Into two parts, right? Make curve aggregate supply curve. Right? So we can classify them based on short run and long run. So in short run, when it comes to your supply, right, we call it as your prices are sticky. Sticky can price එක තැනක තියෙන. Short run එකේ එහෙම නෙවෙයි ළමයි. අපි ඕනම තැනක supply එක ගැන focus කරොත් short run එකේ, right, your supply curve look like this, right, with sticky prices. But your supply, you can't overnight. What is that practically done? Overnight, my supply curve is වෙනස් කරන්න බෑ, right? You can't change your supply curve overnight. So in short run, your supply curve would be something like this, right? ඒකයි මේ curve එක පටන් ගන්නේ something like this. Right? So in short run, your supply curve is stick වෙලා තියෙනවා. right? Overnight පුළුවන් ද ළමයි ඔයාලට හිතන්නකෝ. මේ supply එක ඔයාලට පුළුවන් ද overnight වැඩි කරන්න? right? Overnight වැඩි කරන්න බෑ. මේක ඇන්ඩස් මොකක්ද මේ short run මේ වෙන්නේ? තනි firm එකකට you can. No, overnight you can even increase your supply. But as the entire economy, overnight, short run, you can't increase your supply. So it's sticky. ඔක්කොම එක තැනක තියෙන්නේ. අනිත් එක long run. So what when it comes to long run, right? So long run, what would happen? Long run, we are achieving a point called full employment. Can you remember? This is your full employment, right? Full employment. And the so that is something like this. So in the long run, everything you have done the better. Capacity, right? So when you amalgamate these two conditions of short run and long run, with the time it happens, so that's why the curve goes something like this. Where in the initial days, right, in the initial starting point, you can't increase your supply. But over the time, you can increase your supply. Aggregate supply, make an economic output. You can increase your supply. But after a certain point, you hit the maximum you can. You have what aggregate supply. That is your maximum capacity, which is we call is known as the full employment capacity. Full employment level, right? I have written this as full employment level. You get something like this. That's why this curve looks something like this. Short run aggregate supply and aggregate demand curve. Then why the aggregate demand looks like this, right? Parallel going like something like this. One main reason is that is diminishing marginal utility, right? So over the time, right, your marginal utility starts to decrease, right? That is human nature. That's why the curve looks something like this, right? Quantity are the price drop right? Why quantities of impact look very given the simple example. At this point, you are willing to pay high. Why? Your marginal utility. What do you mean by marginal utility? The satisfaction you get. Right? Satisfaction is very. With the time, what would happen? Your marginal utility starts to decrease. Right? Then make a marginal utility starts to decrease in a proportionate manner. But practically, diminishing marginal utility starts to increase, right? So diminishing marginal utility is the reason why this curve looks like this, right? Okay, may part taking right? Taking the reason is diminishing marginal utility, right? And next one is why this curve looks like this due to short run and long run output capacity. Short run out long run output make curves right? That is it, right? Harder you wanna make a snap because I'm gonna wipe this one off because I want to discuss y equals c part. Wanna snap make a mark. Hari? So this is the maximum you can ask from here. Now let's go to here. recording down. Right. Now, basically at your exam also you will be high tested on this part, y equals e, right? So when it comes to y equals e, what are the components of e? What are the components of e? Expenditure, right? Even the aggregate expenditure, right? What are the components? Yes, we have e, then we have I, then we have G, right? Yes, we have N. හරිනේද මේ පාර්ට්ස් ටිකම තමයි තියෙන්නේ. එතකොට ළමයි මේ පාර්ට්ස් ටිකම තමයි තියෙන්නේ මොකේද? ඔයාගේ aggregate demand එක. තව මොකද්ද? මේ පාර්ට්ස් ටිකම තමයි තියෙන්නේ මොකේද? ඔයාගේ GDP එක. හරිනේද? C I D N. අපි දන්න එක තමයි NX ලේසි එක. So yeah, NX means right net imports, right, or as net exports x minus m. That is your NX. Okay. Then after you step එකක් ඉස්සරහට යන්න, we have discussed what do you mean by I, what do you mean by J. මේ ඔක්කොම කතා කරා. අපි චුට්ටක් වැඩිපුර කතා කරන්න යන්න about T. Then මට කියන්න what are the components inside consumption? Then මේ මම අහන්නේ consumption function එක ගැන, right? What are the components of consumption function? What are the components of consumption function? What are the components of consumption function? Consumption function එක අස්සේ මොනවද තියෙන්නේ? Right? Tell me, what are the components of consumption function? මොනවද මේක අස්සේ තියෙන්නේ? Right? What do we have here? Yes, Lamai, good. And we basically have two parts. What are they? First one is autonomous consumption. Plus induced consumption. Right? So what do you mean by autonomous consumption? What do you mean by autonomous? Right? Though your income is zero, right? In here, right? Though your income is zero, consumption would be X. Right? Though your income is zero, you will have consumption expenditure. That is called autonomous consumption. Right? So we use this, the consumption condition as A0. මේක ඇත්තම කතාව කිව්වොත් තමයි ඇත්තටම මේකට A0. ඕවල් ඉස්කෝලේ කරන්න නැත්නම් A0, right? But we actually call this one as C0 because autonomous consumption. ඒකින්ද අපි ගොඩක් අයට C0 කියලා තමයි කියන්නේ. එක එක ඉස්කෝලේ එක එක තැනවල උගන්වලා තියෙන එක එක විදියට. Either it's A0 or C0. Majority, I'm not pretty sure majority might be A0. I'm assuming it's A0 for majority, but if there is anyone in the class whose school teacher has taught you as C0, චුට්ටක් let me know in the chat box. Right? එහෙම කවුරුයි කියලා තියෙනවා උගන්වලා තියෙනවා නම් මට චුට්ටක් කියන්න. මොකද A0 C0 දෙකම එකයි. but ඔයාලගේ syllabus එක ගොඩක් අයට A0 තමයි ගොඩක් අයට අපි use කරන්නේ. Right? හරි. Then the next part we have is induced consumption. Induced consumption is, right, this is simply the consumption part which change with your income, right? So we simply call this one as what? MPC into income, right? Your MPC into income is your induced consumption, right? Now the problem comes, we simply call this one as what? BY, or else in real terms it's BYD, right? As fine or YD, right? So may they get එකතු කරපුවා තමයි we get the consumption function, right? Now the point is about YD. Tell me YD equals what and what? Tell me how to get YD. How to get YD? How to get YD? Yes. Yeah. Very simple. It's what? Y minus T. Right? Next one. How to get T? T equals Tx minus Tr. Right? Okay, right? Now we have discussed up to here. චුට්ටක් කතා කරා. ගොඩක් ඩීටේල් නැහැ මම නිකන් අපි අර තියරිටිකල් ඕවර්විව් එක අද මම දෙනවා. අපි නෙක්ස්ට් වීක් එකේ ගණන්ම හදනවා. ගණන්ම තමයි හදන්න තියෙන්නේ, right? අද තියරිටිකල් බෑග්ග්‍රවුන්ඩ් එක තියරිටිකල් ඕපනින් එකක් තමයි චුට්ටක් eye open එකක් තමයි කරන්නේ. Right? So what would happen is this is the scenario. But we have a special word, right? Or it's a special concern called MPC. What do you mean by MPC? MPC is your marginal propensity to consume. Right? What do you mean by marginal propensity to consume? Right? Is simply how much you would consume from your disposable income. Or else Y. This is called MPC. Right? And the opposite of MPC is identified as MPS. Right? What do you mean by MPS? MPS is a marginal propensity to save. Now tell me, what's the relationship between consumption and saving? What's the relationship between consumption and savings? Take equation here. Right? What's the notation you need to add in here? And what is the term you need to add in here? What do you need to put the notation? Plus, minus, multiply, or and method the abbreviation. What's the relationship between consumption and saving? Yes, Lamai, what do we have it? Consumption and savings? Yes. Can plus, fill in the blanks. English paper again, fill in the blanks. What do we need to put in here to get this part? And you don't know this one, you know this one. I'm asking what is this one and what is this one? Yes, right? So this is consumption plus saving equals to your disposable income. So having said this one in here, right, we can use it in here as delta S divided by delta YD. So simple math, when you add these 2 points, right, you get delta T plus delta S divided by delta YD. Right? හරිනේ. මේකයි මේක එකතු කරනවා. denominator එක common. ඒක simple math. Denominator common අපිට ඒක එන්නේ use කරන්න. මේකයි මේකයි මේකෙන් බෙදපුවාම we simply get delta YD divided by delta YD. Right? මේ දෙක එකතු කරපුවාම delta YD, right? Delta delta delta, it becomes delta. Right? You do this one as delta Z, then this also becomes as delta S, then simple math. Delta YD, delta delta delta, it comes as this, right? So we can use this abbreviation, this logic, right? We get one, right? We get one in here, right? දැන් මොකද කරන්නේ? මේ පැත්තේ equation එකේ එකයි නම් අපිට පුළුවන් නේද මේ පැත්තත් එකතු කරලා එකට ගන්න. Then when you add these two, what you get? මට කියන්නේ MTC එක MTS එක එකට එකතු කරපුවම what you get? මේ දෙක එකතු කළොත් මොකක්ද දෙන්න ඕන? Again man, yes. If you get one in here, then you will also get one in here. Look, exam එකේ දරලා තියෙන්නේ past papers term test ගහලා තියෙනවනේ then CS එක MCC එක එකතු කරලා එක ගන්න right ඔය තියෙන කතන්දරේ මේක ආවේ කොහමද මේක තමයි simple mathematical fluency තේරුණාද දැන් I product practical product දාගන්න ඇතුළට එන්න consumption we have two parts autonomous consumption and induced consumption. So what do you mean by autonomous consumption? Though your income is zero, you will have consumption expenditure amount, right? That is A0. And also we have induced consumption, which is your consumption which is based on your disposable income. Then we discuss what do you mean by disposable income. Disposable income is your income minus net taxes. Then we discuss what do you mean by net taxes. Net taxes means taxes minus transfers, right? Then we call this one as BYD. So again, if MPC is called B, if MPC is called as B, then MPS is called 1 minus B. MPS is called 1 minus B. Right, method economics 1 minus B equals MPS. Right? So MPC is called B by D. We call it as marginal propensity to consume. Marginal propensity to consume. How much of a marginal income, right, would you allocate for consumption? And the other one is marginal propensity to save. How much of your savings, how much of your income or else disposable income you are going to allocate as savings. When you add these two, you get your what? Yeah, income change. How much you have income change. Why income is very good? Disposable income. So this is the pretty much the mathematical understanding you need to have. How the equation you get. Then the MPC and MPS, the differences and the similarity or else the relationship. Something like this. And the other thing is, did we miss anything? Yes, we missed one thing, important thing. That is simply how to use consumption in the graphical form, right? Right? So we have identified, right, in consumption to use this in the graphical form, right? How to use this in the graphical form? This is consumption, right? So your consumption, look, you have an autonomous consumption. What do you mean by autonomous? Though your income is zero, right, you have a part to play, and then it would increase in a given manner. So this is your slope, right? Slope, which is here B, right? So this is how we draw it graphically in terms of, right, in a usual case, right? Make a nice assumption usual with you, right? Okay, our valid favorite question is, right? So in 2020 paper here, right, so they have asked the difference between aggregate expenditure and aggregate demand, right? So what's the difference between aggregate expenditure and aggregate demand? Right. Any answer? What's the difference between aggregate demand and aggregate expenditure? Aggregate demand and aggregate expenditure. Right. Hi. We'll keep it for the paper discussion. Ma'am, I make a paper ke dano. Then සතියක් තියෙනවා උත්තරේ හොයන්න. කල්පනා කරලා බලන්න. මොකද්ද මේ difference එක? Aggregate expenditure and aggregate demand. What's the difference? Right? අපි දන්නා aggregate demand එකේ components මේවම තමයි. So what's the main difference between aggregate demand and aggregate expenditure? ඔක්කො differences තියෙනවා. ඔයාට මම දැන් කියන්නේ කල්පනා කරලා බලන්න. මම ලේසි එකක් කියන්නම් නෑ එක්ක එපා. Right? There are differences, right? Differences වань. Differences කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? දැන් ළමයි මේක නිකන් මේ exam එකේදී අහනවා what's the difference between මොකක්ද two types of goods වගේ. හරිද? ලොකු differences නැහැ. But you need to know how to differentiate them. But in simple economics, both are the same. Aggregate demand, aggregate expenditure के numbers ගොඩක් වට වෙනස් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. එකම numbers numerically දෙකම එකයි. හැබැයි පොඩි වෙනස්කම් වගේක් තියෙනවා. ලකුණු 7ක් නේ. 4 mark question එකකට how to write, right? That is your struggle. අපි paper class එකේදී एक question එක කතා කරමු, right? So how to understand aggregate demand and aggregate expenditure. මෙතනම තියෙනවා උත්තරේ, right? හිතන්න ඕනේ. දැන් ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන එකයි. exam එක කවදාවත් ළමයි බලන්න එපා, හිතන්න එපා. අර කියන්නේ පොතේ තියෙන දේ ගෙඩි පිටින් හැමම අහන්නේ නැහැ. චුට්ටක් එහාට වැහලා ට්වීක් කරනවා. දැන් මේ ආන්සර් එක මෙතන තියෙනවා. එතන පේන්නක් තියෙනවා. අන්න මේ චුට්ටකට කලින් මේක ආන්සර් එක මෙහෙම කරා, right? So good question, but මේක අමතු දෙයක් නැහැ. චුට්ටක් හිතන්න ඕනේ. The differences between aggregate demand and aggregate expenditure. One simple difference එකක් කියන්නද? Right? So aggregate demand comes in your aggregate demand and aggregate supply model approach. The aggregate expenditure comes in your aggregate income and aggregate expenditure model. මේ දෙක models දෙකක්. උත්තරේ එක වෙන්න පුළුවන්. components එක වෙන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි models දෙකක්. right? ඒ වගේ චුට්ටක් හිතන්න. There are differences like that. නැතුව මේ economic theory differences නෑ. හරිද? ඒ දෙකම එකයි. Theoretically numerically numbers දැම්මොත් එකම number එක එන්නේ. හැබැයි differences තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ චුට්ටක් එක හිතන්න. good question. හැබැයි ඒක fast question එකක්. කමන්නේ අපි ඒක දාලා next week අපි ඒක discuss කරමු. I want to see answers from you. Think. හිතන්න. Right? Okay. So this is simply the consumption part. Now let's go into no. Now let's go into an investment part. Right. Now tell me, in your investment, do you have, right, an autonomous consumption or an autonomous investment and an induced investment, or do you have only one? What මොනවාද තියෙන්නේ? Autonomous එකයි induced එකයි දෙකම තියෙනවද නැත්නම් එකක්ද තියෙන්නේ? In investments, do you have autonomous and induced both, or else you will only have one? Investments. Yes? Yeah. So now you basically have in real scenarios, in real life, we will have induced and autonomous both. Induced and autonomous both real life එකේ තියෙනවා. හැබැයි ඔයාලගේ syllabus එකේ තියෙන මොකද්ද? කැමැත්තෙන් අකමැත්තෙන් only I0. What do you mean by I0? Only an autonomous part. වාගේ I කියන්නේ autonomous එකක්. Income එකත් එක්ක you have no choice to do. Right? So your graphically it could be something like this. Right? The next one is government. Again, the same logic, the same scenario, your government expenditure will also be zero. Because in real life, you will have all, but in your syllabus, you will have only something, right? 100. Right? So these are the ways. So what you do is you're going to amalgamate, you're going to add all these things together. Me graphics, you are going to include. And in your syllabus also, make a chutta quality picky right? Exports and imports, right? These both also have components of autonomous and induced. මේ හැම එකම ඔය ලෝකෙ තියෙන හැම එකකම ළමයි autonomous and induced දෙකම තියෙනවා. හැබැයි syllabus එක අර පොඩ්ඩක් ලේසි කරන්න. ළමයි ඔය complex නොකරන්න. ඔයාට consumption කියන එක විතරයි autonomous කියලා උගන්වලා තියෙන්නේ. Even your exports and imports උත් syllabus එකේ තියෙන්නේ එක තැනක, right? Autonomous කියලා තියෙන්නේ. Induced part එකක් ලොකුවට නැහැ. හැබැයි ඉස්කෝල වල classes වල උගන්වද්දී import එක induce කරලා උගන්වනවා because ඒක පොඩ්ඩක් make sense නෝ. ඒ කියන්නේ income එක වැඩි වෙද්දී චුට්ටක් වැඩිපුර import කරනවා. එහෙමයි කියලා චුට්ටක් එක induce කරනවා මේක අතර M0 දාලා පොඩ්ඩක් අච්චාරු කරනවා. MYD කියලා පොඩ්ඩක් අමාරු කරනවා. but in your syllabus teachers guide එක අරන් බලන්න ඕන තරක තියෙනවා මේක assume කරනවා autonomous කියලා to make our lives much easier. right? ඒකෙන්ද අපි ඒ විදිහට ඉතලා කරමු වැඩි complex කරගන්නේ නැතුව. හරි චුට්ටක් ඉන්න. Now we have space. So what would happen in here is when we get all these things together, you would get a curve line. Can you see it? Yes, very. Right? So your aggregate income curve goes like this, right? So your first one is your investments. Then you might be having your government expenditure, right? Then you will also have your net exports, right? And then you will have your, you might be having your do like this product complex energy consumption, and adding all these things together right? Adding all these things together, you call this space. And new consumption again, sorry. Right, so this is your consumption, net exports, government, and investments. Now, of course, space again. Okay, right, your expenditure curve. Right, so this entire space, right, we call this entire space as your autonomous expenditures. Right? Autonomous expenditures කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? මේ expenditure curve එකේ අපි total expenditure curve එක aggregate expenditure curve එකේ ඉඳන් ඒකේ intersect එකේ ඉඳන් බිඳුව වෙනකන් තියෙන point එක. බිඳුව වෙනකන් තියෙන difference එකට තමයි අපි කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? your autonomous expenditure. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් real economics වල A0 කියන්නේ මෙන්න මේ value. autonomous expenditure. C0 කියන්නේ consumption, autonomous consumption. I0 කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? autonomous investment. G0 කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? autonomous government expenditure. හැබැයි ඔයාලගේ syllabus එක හදලා තියෙන්නේ A0 කියන use කරලා තියෙන්නේ autonomous consumption එකට. Right? So don't get everything miss කරගන්න එපා. කියලා තියාගන්න. A0 කිව්වොත් ඒක ගොඩක් අය autonomous consumption and autonomous expenditure කියන්නේ මේ ඔක්කොම එකතු කරනවා. Right? So what is comes in autonomous expenditure? You get autonomous consumption, you get autonomous investment, you get autonomous government expenditure, and you get autonomous net exports. Right? මේ ඔක්කොම එකතු කරපුවාම right මේ ඔක්කොම එකතු කරපුවාම you get a autonomous expenditure, right? Okay, a valid question has asked, net exports have a negative balance, right? So pretty much it, by any chance am I net exports, if net exports become negative, right? If net export is negative, if net export is negative, what would happen? Then this would be a net exports, right? Take a negative one. Negative might be 100. It could be negative. Additionally, net exports ලංකාව ගැන කොහොමද negative කියන්නේ? ඒක negative දීපුවොත් ඒක පල්ලෙන්. හැබැයි ඒක positive දීපුවොත් it could be going up. ඒක උඩින් තමයි යන්නේ. Alright, so that is the main thing you need to know. I guess we have discussed pretty much it when it comes to y equals the approach also, right? ඊට පස්සේ what we are going to discuss is w equals the approach, and then we are going to discuss equilibriums, right? Then output gap, inflationary gap, this deflationary gap, this inflationary gap, right? A components ටිකක් කතා කරනවා. එතකොට multipliers and mathematics අපි paper එකේදී කතා කරන්නේ. multiply කියන එකත් මම කතා කරන්නේ නැහැ ලොකුට. multiplier and mathematical sums. sum එකකින් කොහොමද අපි හදලා උත්තරේ equilibrium එක කියලා ගන්නෙ, inventory changes identify කරගන්නේ කොහොමද? අර ඒ වගේ parts ටික අපි paper එකෙන් කතා කරනවා. So we have around 45 minutes to discuss W equals the approach, and then we are taking this little bit ලොකුවට අර graphically මේ graphical එක චුට්ටක් අපි පොඩ්ඩක් එහාට මෙහාට ඇදලා පොඩ්ඩක් වෙනස්කම් ටිකක් කරලා පොඩි fun එකක් ගන්න යන්න, right? Okay, so if anyone wants to have a snap of this, have a snap, because I'm going to write this one out. Right? Okay, and the question you have asked, Monkey, right? X and M, right? X and M, right? X can be autonomous, and even M you have induced parts and autonomous parts. ඇත්තටම ළමයි X and M එකේ විතරක් නෙමෙයි. හරිද? ඒ වලට උගන්වලා තියෙන විදිය. ඔයාලා ඉතින් අර ගිරව් වගේ කටපාඩම් කරනවානේ. M විතරක් නෙමෙයි මේ හැම එකේම you have autonomous and induced parts. ඔයා හිතනවාද practically consumption එක විතරයි අපි income එකත් එක්ක depend වෙන්නේ, investments වෙන්නේ නැද්ද? I government expenditure වෙන්නේ නැද්ද? exports වෙන්නේ නැද්ද? නෑ මේ හැම එකක්ම income එකත් එක්ක do have a plug in, right? හැම එකේම induced part එකක් තියෙනවා. ඔයා හිතනවාද එක්කම මේක කවදාකවත් income එකත් එක්ක relationship එකක් නැහැ කියලා? හැමදේම income එකත් එක්ක තියෙනවා. but in your syllabus අර අපිට ලස්සන කරන්න ඕනේ. දැන් ඔයාලා එකයි කියන්නේ campus ගියාට පස්සේ මේ ඔක්කොම ඉගෙන ගන්න auto induce කරලා. එතකොට අච්චාරු වෙනවා. ගාන හිතන්න ළමයි හින දිගේ පට්ට ලූ ගණන් එන්නේ campus universities වල හදන්න කියන්නේ. right? මේ හැම එකෙම තියෙනවා autonomous තියෙනවා induced තියෙනවා මේකෙත් තියෙනවා autonomous induced හැම එකෙම තියෙනවා අර ඔයාලගේ syllabus එක චුට්ටක් ලේසි කරන්න ඕනේ ඒකෙන්ද අපි කියන්නේ investments is autonomous, government expenditure autonomous, exports autonomous, imports සමහර අය imports විතරක් ගන්නවා induce කරලා, right? මම දන්නේ මොකක්ද ඒකේ logic එක කියලා. ඇයි ඒක විතරක් ගන්න? ඇයි ඒව ගන්නේ නැත්තේ කියන එක. right? government expenditure හිතලා ලංකාවේ රටක government expenditure autonomous විතරක් තියනங்க නෑ වැඩි වෙනවා income එක වැඩි වෙනවා නම් තවත් වැඩි වෙනවා, right? So keep this thing in your mind. මේ ඔක්කොම can be autonomous and induced, right? autonomous විතරක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ, induced විතරක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. මේ ඔක්කොම වෙනවා. හැබැයි syllabus එකේ teachers guide එක මම open කරලා පෙන්නන්නම් ඔයාලට. right? Right, so basically small pen and part එක snap එකක් ගහලා ඔයාලට මම group එකට දාන්න. So මතක තියාගන්න both can be exports and imports. Both can be exports and imports. එහෙම කිසිම ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. sorry, both can be autonomous and induced. එහෙම කිසිම ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. exam එකේදී අපි ගණන් හදද්දී එක පොඩක් clarify කරමු. exam එකේදී මතක තියාගන්න exam එකේ you can තැනේ හැටියට ඇනේ. ප්‍රශ්නේ අහන තියෙන විදිහට you have to understand. but ඔළුවෙන් තියාගෙන ඉන්න මේ හැම එකක්ම right මේ හැම එකක්ම can be induced and can be autonomous as well, right? So depending on the economy, depending on the situation, this can be autonomous and this can be induced as well. But ඔයාලගේ syllabus එකේ things simple කරන්න. මේක autonomous, මේක autonomous, මේක autonomous කියලා තමයි තියෙන්නේ, right? මේක autonomous කියලා තමයි තියෙන්නේ, but this can be net export එකේ imports can be, right? Imports can be induced as well. අපි ඒක questions වලදී කතා කරමු. මෙතන පොඩ්ඩක් complex කරගන්න යන්න නැතුව. හරිද දිවංගි? and දිවංගි and others everyone. Imports මම හැම වෙලේම කියනවා imports, right, can be autonomous and induced as well. අපි ඒක ගණන් හදද්දී imports induce කරලා හදමු. ගණන් ඒ විදිහට හදමු, නිකරුත් හදමු. හරිද? නැත්තම් මේ ඔක්කොම අච්චාරු වෙනවා. මතක තියාගන්න the core is මතක තියාගන්න මේ හැම එකක්ම can be autonomous and induced as well. කොහෙවත් කියලා නැහැ investment හැම වෙලේම induced autonomous විතරයි කියලා. නෑ. මේ හැම එකක්ම can be autonomous and induced as well. but syllabus එකේ මේක limit කරලා තියෙනවා up to a induced autonomous part, right? මේක limit කරලා තියෙනවා up to a autonomous part. මේක limit කරලා තියෙනවා up to autonomous part. හැබැයි උගන්වද්දි ගොඩක් අය උගන්වනවා this one මේක import part එක as an induced part also, right? ඒකින්ද අපි ගණන් හදද්දී මේ දෙපැත්තම මේක autonomous තියාගෙන හදමු, induced තියාගෙන හදමු. ඔය ඕනනම් past papers පොඩක් කියවලා බලන්න පෙන්නලා බලන්න you won't get m as an induced. මොකද ඒක induce කරාට පස්සේ ඔයාලා ගණන් හදලා ඇටේ, right? අච්චාරු කියන හොඳටම අමාරු වෙනවා, right? so but let's make everything in practice in the paper, right? හරිද ජීවන්ගේ තේරුණා නේද? මේ හැම එකක්ම autonomous වෙනවා and හැම එකක්ම induced වෙනවා. අපි ගණන් හදද්දී ඔක්කොම මේ ප්‍රැක්ටිකලි තේරෙයි. කියන්නේ ගණන් අපි ගණන් අන්තිමට ඕනේ මොන බයිලා කිව්වත් at the end of the day ලකුණු කරගන්න බැන්න එක්සෑම් එකේදී මාක්ස් ගන්න බැන්න වැඩක් නැහැ. ඒකෙන්ද අපි ප්‍රැක්ටිස් කරමු ඒක කොහොමද මාක්ස් ගන්න කියලා. හරි. this is done. Right, එකක මට කියන්න බලන්න W equals J. What are the components of W and what are the components of J? Right, so we have W and J, so we call withdrawals, right? What are withdrawals? Things going out, right? Things going out. First one is saving. Savings go out. What else go out, right? So from the system, tax go out, right? What else go out, right? Imports, right? Import expenditures go out. Right. On the other hand side, we have injection. Right? Things come in. What? Loans come in, there is investment plug-in, right? Investments plug-in. Then government expenditure plug-in, right? And then what of exports? Exports plug-in. Right? So these are the components of withdrawals and injection, right? These are pretty much the withdrawals and injection. So what do you mean by a simple equilibrium? It is where W equals J, where your S plus T plus M equals I plus G plus X. So මේකට ලස්සන කරන්න පුළුවන් අපිට මේ part එක you can take it this side. So your W equals withdrawals equals savings plus tax equals investments plus G plus MX. Right? So this is pretty much it. Make a simple, there are three. There are three. So when we use them in graphics, when you explain this in graphics, right, the savings, right? From Adina graph එක හරියට වැරදිද කියලා කියන්න. හරිද? ඔයාලා හරියට වැරදිද කියලා කියන්න. Is this right or wrong? Given that you mark the stuff. Is this diagram right or wrong? And you find the equilibrium medium. Is this diagram right or wrong? Alright. Yes, so this diagram is pretty much right, huh? වැරද්දක් අඩුපාඩු වෙන්නේ මෙන්න මෙච්චරයි W equals J කියන approach එකේ තියෙන්නේ. So මේක ඊටු ටික you would have all this mathematics to be played. අපි ඒක ඔක්කොම ඊළඟ paper එකේදී will have lot of numbers and let's see everything gets clarified, right? මේකට ඕන step එකක් දාගන්න so that we are going to discuss the most important part of here, and I'm going to make you prove that this is wrong. ඒක තමයි මගේ satisfaction එක තියෙන්නේ. ඔයාලට තේරුම් ගියාම ඔයාලා මේ කිව්ව point එක වැරදි කියන එක මේ තේරුම් ගිය වෙලාවට මට කියන්න ඔයාලට තේරුණා this is wrong කියලා. That is my prime satisfaction. So I'm going to prove you that you are wrong and that I'm right. හරිද? ඒක දැන් ඊළඟට prove කරන්න යන්නේ. ඔයාලා මෙච්චර වෙලා කිව්ව මේ point එක මම මේක මැකුවෙත් නැත්නම් ඒකයි. මෙන්න මේක වැරදි කියලා. හරි. If you want have a snap. Else not we are good to go. Right. හරි. ඔන්න දැන් අපි තමයි පටන් ගන්න යන්නේ real scenario. We know what you mean by income and expenditure in a very simple nutshell. Right? Tell me what is this height all about? මේ height එක මොකක්ද? What is this gap? මේ gap එක මොකක්ද? What is this gap all about? ඒකේ mean කරන්නේ මොකක්ද? Yes? What is this gap all about? Gap එක මොකක්ද? No, it is not autonomous consumption. It is not autonomous consumption because we talk on aggregate expenditure, right? Aggregate expenditure. So aggregate expenditure on our components. We have T, we have I, we have G, we have NA. Okay, ඔක්කොම කියන. right? එතකොට මොකද වෙන්නේ? අන්න හරි. මේකට අපිට එක්ක කියන්න පුළුවන් මොකද? එක්ක E0, right? Else not total autonomous expenditure, right? Total autonomous expenditure. එහෙම නැත්නම් autonomous expenditure, right? හරි. Then we are going to identify a couple of points. What කියන්නේ මෙතන මේ situation එකේදී right මේ situation එකේදී what is the optimum, right? What is your optimum right? So tell me, what is your equilibrium? What is E0? E කියන්නේ expenditure කියන එක. E කියන්නේ expenditure. E කියන්නේ ඔක්කොම expenditure. So E0 autonomous expenditure. Right? Right? It is autonomous expenditure. E0 මේ gap එක autonomous expenditure. Total autonomous expenditure. Right? What is your equilibrium? ඔන්න අපි දැන් ගන්න what is the macro equilibrium? What is your macro equilibrium? Yes, your macro equilibrium is what? Y1 E1 combination, right? So this is your macro equilibrium. Now මම පොඩ්ඩක් මෙන්න මේක මෙතනම ආයෙ අදිනවා. හරිද? ඔයාලා පොඩ්ඩක් ඔයාලගේ පොඩි වල වලට පොඩ්ඩක් පේන්න. Something like this. මම මේක actual output potential output. Now you know no? Simplify. Right? Now you know, right? So then ඔයාලා කියන්නේ මේක මේ achieve වෙන්නේ මේ y1 කියන්නේ right either this or else either this or else either this කියන දැන් ඔයාලා කියන්නේ නේද මේ මේනේ ඔකනේ කියන්නේ නේද මේ තුනෙන් එකක් වෙන්න ඕනේ නේද මේක නේද right ඔන්න බලන්න වෙන දේ ඔන්න look at the magic. Now your aggregate expenditure increase, right? Now your aggregate expenditure increase up to here. Apakah simple ni kamu ini nak betul? Right. Now tell me what is your equilibrium? Now tell me what is your equilibrium? මොකක්ද වගේ equilibrium එක? Yes, now your equilibrium has starts to Y3 E3. So ideally අපි assume කරමු hi focus India. The next one is right now your aggregate expenditure has decreased. Now what is the equilibrium? E2 Y2 now equilibrium. right අපි assume කරමු මේ ඔයාලා කියන විදිහට මේ points වල තමයි මෙතන කියන්නේ කියලා. හරි ඔන්න ඔයාලා කියන විදිහට ඔන්න මම ඇඳලා. right ඔන්න macroeconomic equilibrium ටික ඇඳලා. right now we are going to discuss on something more important. That is called that is what? That is called your full employment equilibrium. What do you mean by full employment equilibrium? What is the full employment equilibrium mean? Anyone? මේක අවුට් වැඩි වුණා අර වුණා මෙව වුණා අපි දන්නවා. right? Now my question, now my concern is what do you mean by full employment equilibrium? මොකද්ද full employment equilibrium එක කියන්නේ? What do you mean by a full employment equilibrium? full employment equilibrium එක කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? right අපි මෙහෙම ඇන්දොත් right මෙන්න මේක උඩ ඔපරේට් වෙන්නත් ඕන right මේක උඩ ඔපරේට් වෙන්නත් ඕන meantime you need to achieve an equilibrium also. Right. මම මේ කියුව එක හරියද? Right. What? To achieve a full employment equilibrium, you need to have two components, two parts. What is first one? Ideally, the word itself says you need to have full employment. Yeah? Right? You need to have a full employment. I think what you make it full employment equilibrium. You need to have a full employment. Plus the second one, you need to have what? You need to have a macroeconomic. So when you have both of these only, you call it as full employment equilibrium. මම කිව්වනේ හරිද වැරදිද කියලා ඉස්සෙල්ලා. To achieve full employment macroequilibrium, you need to have full employment plus you need to have macroequilibrium. Is it right or wrong? ඉතින් මට එක කියන්න වලට මේක තේරුණාද කියලා. Is this right or wrong? Do you agree or not? Any questions, any queries, any inquiries, clarifications? Full employment macroequilibrium එකට මට කියන්න. Full employment එක තියෙන්නත් ඕන, equilibrium එකක් තියෙන්නත් ඕන. Is it agreeable or not? Is it agreeable or not? What do you think? Agreeable නේද ළමයි? නැද්ද? මම බොරුදු ගන්නන්නේ. So what do you mean by full employment equilibrium? අපි අර ඉගෙන ගන්න economic efficiency ඒ වගේ තමයි. You have two components. පළවෙනි එක තමයි මොකද්ද? Full employment එකක් තියෙන්නත් ඕන. Macroequilibrium එකක් වෙන්නත් ඕන. Right? Then on argument comes. Macroequilibriums තුනක් තියෙනවා. දැන් මේ තුනම can be a full employment equilibrium. Right? That's the argument you need to make. ළමයි මේ තුනෙන් right sometimes there can be only one full employment equilibrium. තේරෙනවද? Full employment equilibrium එක වෙන්නේ මොකද්ද? කොහේ හරි තැනක economic growth එක යන point එකේදී this might be your right the point where you achieve a full employment equilibrium or not. ඔන්න දැන් හොඳට බලන්න මේ diagram එක. I hope it is clear. Now look, this scenario happens from AE1 to AE2 happens. ඔන්න බලන්න මොකද වෙන්නේ කියලා. Now to AE2 and AE2. Now look what has happened. තමයි මෙන්න මෙතනනේ. Look, your price has increased and still look you have an equilibrium. මෙතන equilibrium එකක් තියෙනවා මේ දෙක tangible එක. දෙක වැදිලා. But still look do you achieving full employment? මේ බලන්න මෙතන බලන්න හොඳට බලන්න. AE2 වුණාම මොකද වෙන්නේ? right curve එක උඩට shift වෙනවා. හරිනේ. shift වුණාම ඔන්න ඔතනත් equilibrium එකක් කරනවා. There still you have an equilibrium. හැබැයි when you put it out look ඔයාගේ full employment capacity එකෙන් it has gone up. Now is this a full employment equilibrium or not? The point B. Tell me point B, the point B which I have identified. Is it a full employment equilibrium or not? Point B. අපි simple නේද? Full employment කියන්නේ curve එක උඩ තියෙනවා. දැන් curve එක උඩින් එහාට පැනලා. මට කියන්නේ full employment equilibrium එකකද ඉන්නේ අපි නැද්ද? Yes or no? අලමයි full employment equilibrium එකකද ඉන්නේ නැද්ද? Yes, you are not in, yes, you are not in a full employment equilibrium, but you are in a macroeconomic equilibrium. Look, you are in a macroeconomic equilibrium. Full employment එකක නෙමෙයි ඉන්නේ. හැබැයි ඉන්නේ කොතනද? macroeconomic equilibrium එක. ඒ කියන්නේ මොකද්ද ළමයි? මේ A කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? Point A is your full employment macroequilibrium because your actual output which reflects by your this point, right? You have been and look at actual output again. But this shape is your potential output. Look, point A, then I don't know, you know, this is your what? This is your full employment macro equilibrium, right? ඒ කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? Point A කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? Full employment macro equilibrium. Now my concern is what about point B? Point B කියන්නේ මෙන්න මේ වගේ මේ what? Point B is only a macro equilibrium. because තමයි මතක තියාගන්න. ඔයාගේ business cycle එකේ පෙන්නන්නේ මොනවාද? ඔයාගේ short term මම එදත් පන්තියේදී කිව්වා. ඔයාගේ short term macro equilibriums ටික තමයි ඔයාගේ business cycle එකේ actual output එකෙන් පෙන්නන්නේ. What do you mean by actual output? ඔයාගේ මේ tangent වෙන point එක. right? ඔයාගේ මේ එකට intersect කරන point එක තමයි ඔයාගේ actual output එක. So your macroeconomic equilibriums can come in any place of your actual output. Right? You can come in at any place. Right? හරිද? ඕනම place එකක ඕනම තැනක you can have macroeconomic equilibriums. ඇයි? business cycle එකේ actual output එකෙන් පෙන්නන්නේ මොකද්ද? your macro equilibriums in the very short run. short term fluctuations එක පෙන්නන්නේ. ඉතින් මේ වගේ උඩ පල්ල යනවා නේ short term උඩට යනවා පල්ලයට යනවා. right? උඩට යනවා පල්ලයට යනවා. උඩට යනවා පල්ලයට යනවා. right? So but in the usual case full employment කියන්නේ මොකක්ද? This is where your what actual output equals your potential output. මෙන්න මේ වගේ scenario. right? Actual output and your potential output. right? So if someone asks you, right? මම දුන්න ආයෙ දෙනවා question එක A B C D. right? ඔන්න final theory එක. හරි මට කියන්න දැන් A is A macroeconomic equilibrium? Yes or no? මට තේරුම් ගත්තා හරියට කියන්නේ. Point A මේ උඩ graph එක කියන්නේ. Point A මෙතන නැත්තම් point A, point B, point C and point D. හරි මට කියන්නේ point A is point A a macroeconomic equilibrium? Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes. Right? So point A is a macroeconomic equilibrium. Now tell me point A a full employment macroequilibrium. Full employment එකද point A කියන්නේ? ඒ කියන්නේ මේ වදින තැන intersect වෙන තැනද? Yes or no? Yes. Now point B, tell me හොඳම one. Point B a macroeconomic equilibrium. Yes or no? Point B a macroeconomic equilibrium එකද මේ point B කියන්නේ? Yes or no? Point B කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? අලමයි point B කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? මේක තේරුම් ගන්න දෙන්න බලන්න එකම තැන මෙතන තමයි. Point B කියන්නේ is it a macroeconomic equilibrium or not? Yes, point B කියන්නේ is a macroeconomic equilibrium. ඒ කියන්නේ මෙන්න මේ වගේ situation එකක්. Full employment එක එළියේ. Now tell me, Does it a full employment equilibrium? Point B, a full employment macroequilibrium එකක්. අන්න උතරයි වෙන්නේ. It is not. Point C, yes in both. And again point D, yes but it is not. Right? So ඕක තමයි logic එක. ඕක තමයි කතන්දරය. Right? මේ පාඩ එක තේරුණාද? Right? I hope it understood. Now let's jump back into the exam question. The exam mode එකට පයින් යන්න. Exam mode එකට පැන්නම ළමයි අහුවත් එහෙම full employment කතන්දරේ macroeconomic equilibrium කතාව I would suggest not to draw something like this. මේක අදින්න එපා. Because මේක අපි මම use කරන්නේ ළමයින්ට කියලා දෙන්න උගන්වන්න තේරුම් ගන්න. හැබැයි PPC කියන්නේ right? What do you mean by PPC? It's a micro concept. PPC අපි යන්නේ මොකද? product දෙකක් අරගෙන නිකන් එකක් නෑ දින්නේ. මම ඔයාලට තේරුම් කරන්න හිතුවට. Right? So don't draw this one at the exam. Right? Don't draw it at the exam. Make exam එකේ යදින්න එපා. මේක තේරුම් ගන්න use කරන්න as a concept. හරි අපි බලමු දැන් exam එකේ යදින්න කොහොමද කියලා. Right? Exam එකේ යදින්න මෙන්න මෙහෙමයි. Use your two diagrams. Right? You can now draw the full employment equilibrium. Shit. It's too vague. Right? So you can first draw your expenditure, and this might be your full employment expenditure. Okay, simple. This is your full employment expenditure, right? Okay, තමයි full employment equilibrium. Now you have your expenditure curve too. There you have an equilibrium, but this is above the full employment equilibrium. What a better equilibrium එක තමයි තියෙන්නේ. හැබැයි මේක above the උඩින් යන full employment එකට චුට්ටක් උඩින් යන. දැන් මට කියන්න. What is this gap all about? Right? මට කියන්නේ full employment equilibrium එකයි right අපේ දැන් තියෙන macro equilibrium එකයි අතර තියෙන difference එකට what do we call? Yes, what do we call it? ළමයි what do we call it? Yes, we call this one as the positive output gap. Right? We call this one as the positive output gap. Right? Then, what is the difference between these two? Right? Anyone? What is the difference between these two? Main difference is what? Yes. Yes, we call this one as the inflationary gap. I have a simple question. මට කියන්නේ මේක හරිද වැරදිද කියලා. හිතන්න මම ඔයාලා වගේ ස්ටුඩන්ට් කෙනෙක් මට වැරදිලා මම positive output gap එකට ලියනවා inflationary gap කියලා inflationary gap එකට කියනවා positive output gap එක කියලා. Is it right or wrong? ඔයාලා මගේ marking examiner නම් would you give him or her or would you give me marks or not? මේ දෙක මම මාරු කරලා කියනවා. inflationary gap එක දානවා පල්හැට output gap එක දානවා උඩට. Right? Is it right or wrong? අලමයි is it right or wrong නැත්නම් පව් කියලා අනුකම්පාවකට ලකුණු නම් හම්බෙයි මං අහන්නේ right or wrong yes තමයි මතක තියාගන්න it's technically wrong theoretically technically it's wrong because output gap එක වෙන්නන්න පුළුවන් වගේ output එකෙන් විතරයි but මෙතන expenditures look expenditure වැඩි වෙන්න පුළුවන් and it would create an inflationary gap because we know demand pull inflation නේද demand එක වැඩි වුණාම inflation වැඩි වෙනවා so aggregate expenditure equals aggregate demand so demand වැඩි වෙන්න inflation එක වැඩි වෙනවා why demand pull inflation so මේ දෙක මාරු කරලා ලියන්න බෑ technically වැරදි අනුකම්පා සාගතව පවුනේ මේ ළමයා කියලා ලකුණු දෙන්න පුළුවන් but technically it's wrong so it have to be always inflationary gap this side and output gap this side. Now the next one. Now by any chance, now the economy have a little downturn. Right. Now you have this is 2, this is 3. Now tell me what's the difference between these two. Right? What is the difference between YDF and YD2? YD3? Yes, what is that? Yes, that is your negative output gap. Right? Negative output gap. Then the next one, the height between these two. Right. What's the height between your EF and E3? What's the height between these two? Yes, that is your deflationary gap. Right? අන්න තමයි ඔය ටික තමයි සරලවම what you need to know in your syllabus when it comes to this topic. So we discuss couple of things. One is mathematical interpretation of the and also what we discuss on this what we call this multipliers, right? Multipliers mathematical paper but theoretically this is what you need to know, right? Mama ayat කියනවා මෙන්න මේ diagram එක අදින්න එපා හරිද? Right? මේ දෙක අදින්න එපා මේ ටික අදින්න. හරි. upper part of YDF. So Divya, I didn't get the exact point what you were reflecting here. Illustrate inflation gap by the upper part of YDF. Upper part of YDF. I didn't get the point of upper part of YDF. You mean from here to here, right? So technically, yes, sir. We assume, no, right? We basically assume that gap between these two is constant. Again, parallel. Parallel gap is inflationary gap. May difference is inflationary gap. Again, may point again may difference that's also inflationary gap, right? May difference again appearance, right? That is what you need to know, right? Okay, so these are the main key things what you need to know in your part. Okay, we have a question, right? Okay, I'll put it in the group. Let's see what others have to tell. I'll put it in the chat box. very interesting one. Where to mark the recessionary gap? දැන් හොඳට කල්පනා කරලා කියන්න recessionary gap. හොඳට කල්පනා කරන්න දැන් recession කියන වචනේ කොහෙද තිබ්බේ? අපි ඒක කොතනද මාක් කරන්නේ? මට කියන recessionary gap එක අපි එක්ක මෙතන මාක් කරලාද තියෙන්නේ? නැත්ද? First thing, right? What do you mean by a recession? දැන් මේ diagram එකෙන් ගන්න පුළුවන් recession. What do you mean by recession? Recession එකක් කියන්නේ මොකද්ද ළමයි? right? Basic recession එකක් කියන්නේ මේ economy එක පල්ලෙහාට වැටෙන part එක නේද? right? හිටපු තැනක ඉඳන් පල්ලෙහාට වැටෙන part එක. So your recessionary gap ideally means, right? You are what? You are basically, right? Depending on the question and depending on your exam, ඒ දීලා තියෙන තරත් එක්ක recessionary gap is a part of your negative output gap. ඇයි මේ? මෙන්න මෙතන ඉඳන් පල්ලෙහාට වැටෙනවා නේද? So assuming you were here, right? Assuming you were at full employment equilibrium, මෙතනින් මෙතනට වැටෙනවා. So what? Assuming you were at the full employment equilibrium, මෙතනින් මෙතනට වැටෙනවා. මෙතනින් මෙතනට වැටෙද්දී what will happen? This is your negative output gap, which is in synonym, it is the recessionary gap. ඒක පොඩි synonym එකක් තියෙන ළමයි ආ. ඒකයි මම කියන්නේ. හිතන්න මොකද්ද මේ exam එකෙන් අහන්නේ? Recession එකක් කියන්නේ මොකක්ද? Short term downturn එකක්. Short term downturn එකක්. එතකොට මේ තියෙන්නේ negative output gap එක. ඒ කියන්නේ your recessionary gap එක. ඒකින්ද ඒ වගේ චුට්ටක් කර අපි කියන්නේ අර මේ don't be so conventional and orthodox. ගන්න ප්‍රකාරම හිතන්න එපා. චුට්ටක් ඉතින් එහාට හිතන්න exam එකේ එහාට මෙහාට synonyms use කරන්න පුළුවන්. හරි. So that is it in terms of this. If you want to have a snap, have a snap. Right? So now we have discussed almost all the economical theories, right, regarding the part of macroeconomic equilibrium. අපි approaches to identify කරගත්තා. ඒක අස්සේ තියෙන parts එකත් identify කරගත්තා. අද key learning එක මොකද්ද? මෙන්න මේ grid එක. පොඩියට තිබ්බට මේකෙන් තමයි මේ හැම එකම derive වෙන්නේ අන්තිමට. macro equilibrium එක කියන්නේ අපේ කොහේ හරි command equilibrium එක stable කියන තැන. ඒක full employment ම වෙන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. සමහරවිට පොඩි hype එකක් create වෙන්න පුළුවන් boom එකක් වගේ. right? නැත්තම් පොඩි temporary downturn එක recession එකක් වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්. හරි? So lamai, this is pretty much it when it comes to the lesson for the today's day. So we will be having the paper maybe tomorrow or day after I'll upload the paper. So you have an entire week to do it. Make godak maths thiyena, mathematical parts godak thiyena. Mokada api focus karna on the maths. Because at the exam also you will get a little calculation to be done. You get the maths godak වැඩි godak target karna at the paper. And also the multiplier thing, right? MPC over 1 over MPC. 1 over 1 minus NBC, mathematically next paper. So this Wednesday we don't have the class, right? And this Friday, sorry, this Saturday we will be having the usual paper class, and then moving forward, one plan right? That's pretty much it for the coming week. And extremely sorry for the early lag we had, and now apparently my lag Wi-Fi router right? ඊළඟ පාරත් lag වුණත් කරන්න තියෙන්නේ outer regular off කරලා on කරන්න. So it's a good learning for me also. Anyway, so lamai, that's it for the day. Thank you and very God bless and study well. හොඳට පාඩම් කරන්න. පාඩම් කරන තරමට you will reap the benefits. So thank you, and if you have any concerns, just drop me a text. අනිවා සමහරවිට reply කරලා නැති ඇති. මට චුට්ටක් ආයේ මේ message එකට පොඩ්ඩක් උඩින් ගන්න කරමයි chat එකේ උඩට එනවා. ඒතර මට ඒක reply කරන්න පුළුවන්. So thank you and God bless, and if you have any concerns, find me through WhatsApp until we meet up in the next class to the paper discussion on next Saturday. Next Saturday at 9 p.m. Okay, thank you and good night. Right, good night, good night.